Okay, hello everyone. As usual for the WFA, we're delighted to welcome many of you from multiple time zones today. As I always do, I'd like to preempt a couple of questions that our members usually ask of us. Firstly, yes, we will be able to share the presentation with you after this webinar, and we'll also make a recording of the webinar available so you can share with your colleagues as you see fit. We should have you with us for about 45 minutes today, and our focus, as you may be aware, today is a topic which should be high on everyone's agenda, which is consumer insights. And firstly, I would just like to put faces to names, if you like. I think most of you will know me, Rob, on the right. And together with my colleague Natalia, I'm going to be making sure that this runs as smoothly as possible today, and we'll be taking your questions. But our five-star speaker is the good-looking guy on the left, John Kearon. John is chief juicer of a company called BrainJuicer. Many of you will have know him already. John's company, like to challenge the conventional, and actually they brought a great deal of value to our work at the WFA for a number of years now, and we're happy to call them one of our strategic partners. And happily for someone who's presenting on the future of insights, John is in fact a very insightful guy, and we always love listening to him, and I'm sure you will do too. But before I pass you over to John, I'm going to give you a little bit of background for those of you who are new to the WFA, and I do see some new as well as some familiar names on there. The WFA is essentially a global network for client-side marketers. Within our membership, we boast over 80 of the world's biggest multinational brand owners, so you can see here, and also 60 national advertiser associations. So I know a lot of you are dialing from the US, so A&A in the US, but also ISBA in the UK, UDI in France, ABBA in Brazil, the list goes on. So 60 markets around the world, and within our working groups we bring together senior client-side marketers from around the world, really to learn from one another to become more effective and efficient in their marketing investment. And we deliver this through various work streams which meet remotely and also in person around the world, as you can see here. And one of the hottest topics amongst these groups is really about how to become a more customer-centric organization. And to achieve this, these brands obviously need more insight into their potential customers. However, one of the issues raised, not least within our IMC forum, is that actually when it comes to working with market research and consumer insight colleagues, often what they receive back is information or statistics, if you like, rather than meaty insights around which they can develop integrated marketing solutions. I mean, it's worth pointing out here that our consumer insight colleagues would, in most cases, challenge that. For consumer insight function, marketing is actually often cases just one of the many stakeholders that they're dealing with, and we often hear that actually marketers aren't always the easiest partners to work with. But not to be divisive, the point here is really that we observed the gap between the two functions and identified an opportunity to help both parties improve. That's why we launched the Insight Forum. This is a network of client-side global market research and consumer insight leaders. And whilst this group is still relatively new, they've already helped us deliver a unique project, which is what we're going to focus on today, the future of insights. I'm going to leave it for John to share more details on how the project can help you. But for now, very briefly, a little more context. As I said, the findings in today's webinar come from one of the biggest projects we've undertaken, and our sample that we're going to refer to includes a mix of consumer insight specialists and global marketing leaders, so over 300, which enables us to explore the gaps that I referred to. So, as I say, 94 brand owners took part, 2.6 trillion global annualized sales. You get the idea. It's a big project. Thank you so much again for those of you who took part. It's worth pointing out now that if you would like to run this study within your own organization to enable you to benchmark your company to our pool that you see here, you'd be most welcome to, and it'd be at no cost to you. I know John and the team at BrainJuicer would be delighted to help, and they've already helped many of our member companies to do that. So Final thing from me, and before I hand over to John, I'd like to hand over to you. This will be an interactive session today, and we're just going to launch a quick poll for you. So the question is very straightforward. What do you feel is the contribution of your consumer insight function to profitable brand growth for your organization? So is it massive? Is it high, moderate, low, or none? If you could just register your votes there. And while you do that, just to point out that you will see a Q&A widget, I think at the bottom right of your screens. Please, at any point as you go through today, do pose questions to us. Myself and Natalia will put those questions to John, and we'll allow plenty of time at the end for him to answer those questions. So there you go. If you could just close that, Natalia, thank you. So there you go. Interesting. A very confident 11% saying it's a massive contribution from the consumer insight function. 50% saying high, and 29% saying moderate. So you might disagree, but I'd say that's a pretty positive score that we're showing right there. So I'll let John. I will let John make comments on that in a second, but. Just briefly, by way of introduction to John, he's no stranger to the WFA, having presented at our Global Marketer Week in Sydney, as well as Kuala Lumpur, where he was originally born. But just say, John, a very warm welcome back to the WFA.
Thanks, Rob. Hi, everyone. It's worth saying, I mean, this has been an amazing project to be part of. And I'd like to set it in context because I know a lot of reports, purport to be the final answer, the conclusions. And there are some themes that we're going to share with you, and there are some, suggested actions. But it was always intended to be the first step in a kind of learning process, really, so among the members. So this was to capture as best we can a kind of state of the nation of insights, the good, the bad, the ugly, to pull out some themes and to shape a direction that we can then sit around a table and debate, discuss, and hopefully create some ideas that you can all share, that we as an insights community can kind of share to make a bigger contribution, to the business. So Rob, I know, will give some detail at the end about the round tables, and it'd be wonderful if you can, if you feel excited enough about it to get involved, because I think this is one of those times that sharing it and trying to do it collaboratively is going to be better. So very briefly, BrainJuicer and myself, if you don't know us, we're basically focused on translating behavioral science and into System 1 research techniques that better predict 5-star marketing. We're just trying to help produce, famous marketing. You'll be glad to hear there endeth the BrainJuicer plug, and we will begin. The future of insights. Why on earth is there a rowing boat there? We've been doing some work with the Great Britain coaches of the Olympic team, and really interesting, actually. And one of the stories they told, I loved, and I wanted to share it with you because I think it's a nice sort of framing for the work that we all do. The Great Britain Olympic 8. This was many years ago, were coming 7th, 8th consistently. They were nowhere near the medals. And they adopted a mantra, which was, will it make the boat go faster? Which they used to basically as their criteria for everything they did, whether it was a new training program or how they should sleep or the boat design or, kind of their technique. Will it make the boat go faster, which was all about the performance and measuring everything as precisely as they could in order to know, whether it makes a contribution or not. And my suggestion, I think, is that insights need an equivalent question. And my proposed question for this is, will it increase profitable brand growth? So the equivalent of the will it make the boat go faster is, will it improve profitable brand growth? And that was the reason to ask you the poll, about what do you believe is, Insight's contribution, to profitable brand growth. And we did this yesterday. We had a webinar yesterday as well, and it was very similar. About 10% feel, the Insights make a massive contribution. And yesterday was slightly more mixed between high and moderate, but basically, the majority, 80%, is split between high and moderate, and then 10% low. Okay, and we'll come back to that because I feel our aspiration, no doubt, is much higher than that. But let's set the whole of Insights just in a quick historical context, because when we were doing this, putting the survey together this year, I realized that market research is 100 years old to the year. So in 1916, it was the first really recorded poll, and this was the Literary Digest in America. So the Americans among you, this is where market research started, in politics, in America. And the Literary Digest polled, I think, 2 or 3 million of its readers and correctly predicted that Woodrow Wilson would become president in November of 2016. Now, I am not suggesting that dear Donald on the right will, be the president, but, here we are 100 years on, okay, and market research has evolved enormously from those early polling days into the world of Gallup, where it was scientific sampling, and we learned that we didn't need 1 million people. We can predict the results pretty accurately, with much smaller samples, through just after the Second World War, and it was basically the rise of qualitative research. That's where qualitative research came from. Dicta, motivational research, then that came to a rapid halt with the Vance-Packard hidden persuaders. And I'd say that the last 30, 40, or certainly previous 30 years were characterized by a kind of persuasion marketing, USPs, differentiation, segmentation, the things that we've all grown up with and know well. And only in recent years, probably the last decade, has a sort of psychological influence come back into market research, through behavioral science. And it's worth us, taking stock and being honest with ourselves, because, here in the UK a year ago, 100 polls, different polling companies, all got the prediction of the UK election result wrong. Yeah, they predicted that it would be a hung parliament and it'd be a coalition government, and the Conservatives actually ended up winning a clear majority. The polls at the moment in America have all pretty much got Hillary ahead, not massively, but ahead, and that's been consistent. And I'm not, we have methods, and they haven't always predicted. So I feel, and the theme of this presentation is really going to be, let's understand insights, let's be honest with ourselves, let's find a way to increase profitable brand growth, because the more directly we can influence that, the more value will be perceived to lie in insights, and the greater the contribution and credibility. So where I wanted to start, I'll just build these on the screen in front of you, but we had 5 typologies, which hopefully you'll recognize, but these are deliberately separate types of insight activity inside a company, going from the micro and reactive through to the proactive and macro. And what we asked people in these, and basically the 309 people who took part, by the way, were CMOs or heads of insight of pretty much the world's biggest, consumer companies. And which of these they felt, the roles that they were performing. So right the way from librarian, where it's basically the keeper of the data, to a judge, where you're actually helping, make judgments about what's good, what's bad. Caddy, where you're partnering with marketing and making more of a contribution, still quite reactive. Or an explorer, where you're going out into the world, whether it's new techniques or insights or observation, and bringing back not just the data, but extracting the insight and having an inspiration, an inspirational role in the process, or right the way to the ultimate, which is a strategic consultant. Actually, what questions should we be asking? What's the framework for marketing? What's the model of how people really decide? This is a much bigger, more strategic role. Yeah, and results were interesting. So on the screen, you've basically got we split the results into the heads of consumer insight and then marketing, so you can see and compare, contrast the different views. So this is how insights, this is how we see ourselves. And generally speaking, it's almost 50% feel that we're already being a strategic consultant, a third as a caddy, a partner, and then it's split really between judge and explorer. But when you lay on marketing, you get quite a different picture. And I don't think this is actually going to be a big surprise to anyone listening. From marketing's point of view, insights, 30%, a third of what they perceive insights' role to be is librarian. They agree that a third of it is caddy, but it's only a quarter who feel that insights are delivering a strategic consultant offer, if you like. And actually, it's pretty similar around explorer. So this is the area that we want to focus on, as I sort of veil the story of how it emerged. But let's start here, which is, how do you feel about working in consumer insights? And how do you feel, about, so how does marketing feel about insights? Yeah, so on the left-hand side, you've got surprise, happiness, white is neutral, and then the negative comments at the top. So this is insights leaders, how they feel about insights. And you can see, 50% are positive. Actually, I think it's I don't know, it's interesting to me that a third of insights leaders are neutral about how they feel, and actually quite a lot negative. When you look at marketing, how does marketing feel about insights? The positivity, I'm afraid, drops to a third. The neutrality increases to 40%, and the negativity increases by a similar sort of margin. Now, before we get carried away, any two functions that are trying to work together, I'm sure R&D and marketing may have, there are always going to be tensions. That's not a bad thing. In Formula One teams, they accept that you need a bit of tension between the engineers and the drivers and the people in the pits. So that's fine. But let's just have a look at some of the comments, if you like, about what's the nature of what they like and how is it different. So this is insights people, and how they feel on the left and marketing on the right. So from insights, it's future focused, it's top managed, endorsed, it's good people. For marketers, it's well integrated into marketing. This is when it's good. This is the people who are feeling positive about it, continually doing new things, bringing new thinking into the organization, that explorer role. In terms of neutrality, for marketers, it's like, well, there's no passion, there's no real insightfulness. This is neutral. They're saying, it sounds quite negative, but they're giving it a neutral rating, too stuck in conventional ways, perhaps. Whereas on the insight side, the neutrality is really coming out of impact of the role in the business and the lack of budget to achieve that impact. When you get to the negative comments, marketing, traditional methodologies, they don't give, there's too much data in too many silos. They're not producing actionable insights. Yeah, lots of untapped opportunity. Whereas for insights, there's a focus on the results being, built in, but it's not being used. It's not really part of the business in a really meaningful way. The question we asked after that was, well, let's just wind forward. What's the aspiration? What's the ideal function for insights? What do you want your insights department to, to bring, to deliver? Hallelujah. So this is where there seems to be, sort of violent agreement that it is to be a strategic consultant, to help marketing frame things, ask the right questions, challenge, to get involved in the commercial, profitable brand building, efforts, but also to go and explore, go out, learn about new techniques, work out which ones of them can actually make a big contribution and which ones not. So I think this is the good news, that there's a clear target, if you like, there's a clear aspiration for what insights could and should be doing more of.
Thanks, John. Continuing on the theme of profitable brand growth, we're going to turn it over to our members on the webinar again and just ask very straightforward questions. So thinking of your organization, does it measure Insight's contribution to enhancing profitable brand growth? So if you could just post your answers there. Just a couple of things while you're registering your responses. First of all, we will share the deck, the report, and the recording of this webinar with you after the session. No worries there. And also, please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A widget, and we'll make sure we get to those at the end and ask those questions to John. So Natalia, if you could just close that there. Fantastic. Okay, so John, very similar result to yes, almost exactly the same. In fact, the last webinar.
Yeah, almost exactly the same actually, and it's fascinating. 75% no, we don't really measure Insight's contribution to profitable brand growth, and 25% that do. And we have to compare, contrast, or put that together with the previous poll about what do you feel is your contribution, to the business, massive, high, moderate, because I think there is, in all these things, we all are trying to do our best. We believe that we're, making a contribution. We want to feel valued. But what I was saying at the beginning of will it make the boat go faster has a requirement at its core to measure these things and to be really depersonalized of it. It's all about the performance. And I think if we don't have a measure of whether insights are making that direct contribution to profitable brand growth, then actually the rest is all self-perception, that we're making a high or a massive contribution. We don't actually know. Now, it's a really difficult thing to measure Insight's direct contribution to profitable brand growth. Okay, so that's where we're hoping that the round tables is this, well, we're suggesting is one of the core topics for your peer group and your colleagues, so that we can explore. So the 25% of yesterday and today where people said, yes, we are measuring that. I mean, I know there's sometimes a worry about competitive advantage between companies, but this feels like something that would just be a good for the industry, for us as a function and us as a department. So I'm hoping that we can encourage people who are measuring it to share how they're doing it, share their experiences, and to see whether collectively we can come up with, some suggestions for how to measure that contribution, which then we can measure whether we're making the company boat go faster, and we actually know where and how much we're making that contribution. Okay. So what I wanted to do just in the next few minutes really was to show you three things really, which came out of the report as I think obvious things that Insights can do to make a greater contribution to the business. And the first one is incredibly easy, which is it seems that the more Insights and marketing actually physically sit together, and work together, the more positive Insights are perceived to be and the more positive Insights feel about what they're doing. So I know it seems almost trivial to say it, but sitting together and working together, you're part of the team, is a really simple thing to go almost from librarian to caddy. You become much more of a part and a partner in the process. The second thing came out of looking at which new research methods make the greatest commercial contribution, or at least in perception. So this is both marketing and insights. Yeah. So the question was just which of these would you say, how effective are each of these at generating commercially advantageous insights? And in grey, what we've done is we've put focus groups almost like a benchmark, as focus groups I think have been around a long time, and I'm sure they will continue to be around a long time, and I know are perceived to bring a valuable contribution. So let's start with the ones to the right. So there are 4 techniques where both marketing and insights feel that they are bringing a greater commercial advantage than even focus groups. And it's ethnography, behavioral data analysis, behavioral science, and storytelling. So what I was saying at the beginning of the last decade and this behavioral science, I mean, these are all in the territory of what people are doing, their behavior, or at least 3 out of the 4 are, rather than what they're saying. And that, I think, is an interesting, it's like we know people aren't trying to lie to us, but we're not particularly brilliant witnesses sometimes to our own motivations. So the more we can understand how people really make decisions, behavioral science, the more we can actually measure what they are doing and observing what they're doing, that feels like it's bringing us closer to helping marketing achieve better marketing and profitable brand growth. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got facial coding, neuro measurement, gamification. And they're pretty hot topics. And certainly even more so from the heads of insight. And I suspect this is because they've actually experimented and they've tried them and they've trialed them and actually are not convinced how much commercial contribution they're contributing. It's almost like the bright, shiny new bright object syndrome. And this again, I think, relates to that sense of measure, measure, measure. Let's have measures of, is it making the boat go faster? Are we actually contributing to profitable brand growth or not? Otherwise, it becomes completely subjective, anecdotal, and we have no evidence, for whether a technique should be rolled out and endorsed and used a lot more or not. So in order to go from being a caddy into that explorer role that both marketing and insight leaders sort of felt this is where insight should be going, we've got to kind of actually have a bit of rigor, I think, about measuring and trialing new techniques and to understand the context in which they make a contribution and the context in which they don't, or whether they don't at all. So that feels an important part of what we need to do. So that's the second.
John, just one question that came up, if you don't mind me interrupting. Just after
Sure.
what is meant by storytelling as a methodology. My understanding is it's around people basically telling a narrative around a product or a service or experience, and then generating insights from that story being told by the people that you're talking to. Is that fair description?
Yeah, that's a fair description, yeah. And it's really quite close to focus groups. It's come out of encouraging people to tell a story about a brand and about the narrative that brand represents.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So to go from librarian to caddy, sit together, to go from caddy to explorer, it's really about techniques and the commercial contribution of those techniques. And the third part of it, I think, is to get into that strategic consultant position that I think is the aspiration for us, but also for marketing. That's the role. There is continuing to be a revolution in the understanding of human psychology and how people make decisions, and therefore how modern marketing works. And what we did is we put together 10 statements, which were all deliberately phrased in a way that, frankly, I was taught at Unilever that these things were true. And actually, the latest work, both from the IPA on how advertising works, but also from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute on how brands grow and how people make choices. Every one of the statements, I'm not going to go through them all, but they're in the report, but Every one of these 10 statements is false. So what we've done, so these are the heads, I mean, remember, these are CMOs and heads of insights. These are the most senior people. On the left-hand side, you've got basically the things that are increasingly known and understood by big companies, that consumers don't carefully evaluate competing brands before buying. Yeah, we shouldn't focus single-mindedly on brand loyalty, because actually penetration is how brands grow. The loyalty exists, but it's very fixed. So the brand leader has slightly more loyalty than the number two, who has slightly more loyalty than the number three. So focusing too much on brand loyalty won't change your brand's profitability. And over on the other side, just to go for the extremes, the idea that good research is about striking an even balance between rational and emotional measures, which I think we have as an industry. We've assumed a left brain, right brain equality. We need both of these things, when actually measuring measuring people's emotions and instinctive and under time pressure responses is a much better predictor of what will actually happen, what people will actually do. And the idea that differentiation, USPs are the key to a brand growth. It's like that's part of the persuasion marketing model, which no, it seems that distinctiveness, things that have no functional value, but the white earbuds of the Apple iPod, originally the iPhone, they don't have any functional value, but they signal a distinctiveness so that it's Apple, or the Coca-Cola bottle shape. These are the things, so recognition speeds decision. These are the things that make something easier to buy from a repertoire. And one of the most interesting findings, just to finish, and then I'll give you the three conclusions, and hopefully we can open the floor to Q&A and a bit of a discussion, is in the spirit of trying to deliver on that management consultant, that strategic consultant role that everyone wants. The insights people in our study scored significantly higher than their marketing colleagues in knowing that these old beliefs are false. And I think that feels like a real opportunity for insights to lead the way in the understanding of modern marketing, and to help frame, and to also help pick the techniques that will measure these things more, and more accurately predict the future. So, in conclusion, 3 ideas to make the boat go faster, if you like. And this is just, remember, this report was, we hope it's just the beginning of engaging in any ideas that help insights make a direct contribution to profitable brand growth. But sitting together, we go from librarian to caddy, exploring more and having a rigor about measuring whether those new ways of exploration are actually making a contribution, take us from caddy to explorer, and actually packaging and communicating and coaching even in the things that actually make brands grow, the behavioral science and all the latest psychological sort of breakthroughs, is where we have the potential to go from explorer to strategic consultant and make a direct contribution to profitable brand growth. I'll stop there.
Thank you, John. I've a couple of questions coming through. Please feel free to post your questions now if you have any for us to put to John. One asking a question about sort of more clarity on what you mean by behavioral science and behavioral data analysis. I think maybe an action from this could be to share some examples that we had in the last webinar in terms of organisations are doing this. It's probably a good way to approach that, unless you wanted to touch on it now, John.
Yeah, no, look, I mean, I think it would really benefit everybody, and I took it as an action from yesterday for the round table to have there are some companies who I think are slightly ahead of the game. So Mars are, have been pretty open about adopting the Ehrenberg-Bass and the behavioral science sort of approach, and question how much they're willing to share. But also Procter and Gamble, Joan Lewis, when she was head of CMK, did a lot of work with Mark Pritchard, and the new P&G brand building way is definitely adopted a lot of the sort of behavioral science principles. Unilever going slightly different way, but their sort of purpose-led branding and emphasis on emotion has a lot of echoes in behavioral science, but don't really talk about it in that way. But yeah, I think the brands that have actually always done it, but not with any framework, of course, are the likes of Nike. Apple when it's at its best. Apple's interesting because it's basically, frankly, the ads that Steve Jobs was involved with personally are the ones that are, famous forever. 1984 won't be like 1984, and the iPod silhouette campaign. And frankly, a lot of the other Apple ads are pretty terrible. They're all product functions, features, and utterly forgettable. So they're interesting because they managed to do both.
So, talking about the sort of explorer role, trying to get your perspective on what's the role of the Internet of Things in defining insights.
Yeah, well, there is a great potential, isn't there, with this data tsunami, and we're all aware of. But if any of you, I don't know if any of you are fans of Nassim Taleb, of the author of Black Swan. He's a very interesting guy, and the cautionary tale that he tells about big data, I think, is the cautionary tale that we need to take on board as well. And it ties into this, does it make the boat go faster? We're the ones that need to help the organization decide whether big data can make a direct contribution and in what context. So his thing is that the big data is generally very, very, it's just more of the same data that we had before. And so if you have error in the original data, all you're doing is multiplying the error. There's nothing about the data sources aren't diverse enough or different, qualitatively different enough to give you new perspectives and new angles, which of course that's when you thread together data from different points of view in a way that you've never been able to do before, then you can have new insight, then you can have clarity, you can see things you couldn't see before. But if it's just more of the same data, then potentially it's just greater error. And I know that's not a direct answer, but do you know what I mean? I think it's our job as researchers, statisticians, insightful kind of where we understand people, but we also understand data, to actually put it together in a way that draws out insight, that actually, can be inspiring.
Yeah. Okay, we've got quite a few. We may not be able to get to all of these questions, but a couple more for you. We were talking about one of the conclusions being about sitting together. The question here was, when you say sit together with marketing, are you also considering being organizationally connected to marketing, or simply having offices together and working closely? And I think when we discussed this within the Insight Forum, I mean, this isn't an answer, but I think the conclusion from that group is it's more than one way to skin a cat. It depends on your organization, what category you're within, how closely you can actually physically sit together, how many stakeholders are potentially involved. But any views on that, John?
Well, I mean, best to reveal it. I mean, I think there was evidence from the report, but let me give you this as my prejudice. I think when you have a shared objective of enhancing or delivering profitable brand growth, you've got the same objective, and it feels to me like it must be a partnership. I mean, of people with different skills. It doesn't mean that you just agree with everything that the other party says, but where it becomes adversarial to them and us, to, we, the researchers, are here to stop marketing doing stupid things, and I know that's probably a simplification and an exaggeration, but I have definitely seen, witnessed, been part of organizations where marketing and insights, that's how they feel their roles are. Then I think that can't be to the benefit of the organization. You know, there has to be a shared goal, a sort of a shared respect, and a shared, you know, kind of effort, you know, to achieve a result that, you know, that's meaningful and positive.
Okay, we have time for one more here. So, talking back to methodologies again, this person asking a question about how you get your company to invest in techniques that aren't the cheap, quick and dirty ones. So, i.e., ethnography and storytelling, which share emotions. So, basically saying often the cheap and quick yield superficial, which feeds the cycle that you're talking about. So, any tips on selling those methodologies internally?
Yes. Storytelling. This is where, even if it's not your own success internally, you know, the various WFA do it, SMR, MRS, the AMA. There are case studies where people have done amazingly, you know, clever, insightful projects, you know, on understanding patient care or something using ethnography. And I think it's beholden on us to tell the story of how a new technique like that may take time and it may take money, has transformed a brand's fortunes and a company's fortunes. Yeah, and use, you know, it's the classic thing where you focus on one story and make people feel the excitement of it, the benefit of it, in order to justify, you know, doing it yourselves. Because I think this bright, shiny new object syndrome is an issue. And I also think doing the current techniques, which frankly are quite system two and not very predictive, cheaper and faster, is just basically a bit like I said with Nassim Taleb. It's just increasing the speed at which we're making errors, and we're not contributing as much as we need to making the company boat go faster, you know. And so I think a combination of precision and data to show what makes a contribution at one level, coupled with better storytelling, better ways to tell a story and move, you know, the senior people to commit budget to something, is our challenge.
Okay, so I think we are almost there on the 45 minutes that we promised. I'm going to end, if you don't mind, on a bit of a plug on the WFA. So questions like that in terms of approaches using to selling in new methodologies, exactly the sort of benchmark that we run amongst our members. So any members that have questions like that you'd like to anonymously pose to your non-competitors amongst the brands that I showed at the start of this session, myself or Steve Lightfoot, who runs our Insight Forum, would be delighted to do that for you. Two other sort of topics to raise. I appreciate that most of you are not in this time zone who are on this webinar today, a lot of you based in North America, but we have an Insight Forum happening in Singapore on the 28th, if you happen to be in that region. Slightly closer to home, on the 10th of November, we will be in London for the Insight Forum. If you want to get involved in either of those, please let us know. And also, as John mentioned, we'll be doing a round table with BrainJuicer around the conclusions about driving profitable brand growth, for example, in London on the 18th of October. And you'd be more than welcome, providing you're a WFA member, you'd be more than welcome to join us at that session. So please save the date and drop us a note if you'd like more information. So with that, bang on 45 minutes. I'd just like to say, John, thank you so much for joining us again. Love hearing you share on that, and really useful.
Thanks. Loved it.
Great, and also to all of you for joining us today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and as I said, we'll be following up with a copy of the presentation. You can see the link for the actual document at the top of this slide, but we'll be sharing a follow-up. So thanks all for your attention and for your time today. Goodbye.